Parents were both Catholic, went to 12 years of Catholic education. I definitely knew a lot of the right answers about what my church taught and what I was supposed to believe. So I didn't know how to defend my faith or how to answer questions about my faith. I just kind of knew the answers to the questions on the test. As we went through marriage prep, the dreaded question came up of contraception, as everybody deals with. As I mentioned, my husband we met in my, second year of med school, got engaged in my third year of med school, and then got married in my fourth year of med school. It's an 88-page booklet, very exhaustive. It was very scientific, very statistical, and I read the thing, just devoured it. And it was extremely compelling, and really I became convinced that yes, it can cause abortions. And so, the three mechanisms of the pill, and then the third mechanism is that it thins out the lining of the uterus where the fertilized egg, the new baby, would implant. It thins that out so much that if the sperm reaches the egg and fertilizes the egg, then as it travels into the uterus, it would not be able to implant. There would not be a thick enough, rich enough, nourishing endometrium to nourish that baby, and it would just not implant then, and it essentially be like a spontaneous abortion caused by, they call it an inhospitable environment. So, and that's that third mechanism that, as you can see, can cause a very early abortion to a newly developing baby. Back in 1960 was when the first oral contraceptive pill came on the market. It used to be defined as the fertilization of an egg by a sperm. But in 1965, ACOG decided to change that definition of conception to be when the fertilized ovum, they initially called it, which is not the right term even, ovum is the egg, the fertilized egg, when it implants in the uterine lining, that's when ACOG says conception has occurred. And so it doesn't prevent conception if you change your definition of conception. So in 1965, they changed this definition of conception, and it really helped them get around this problem of how are we going to market this pill to people who probably don't want to be killing babies. They might want to prevent babies, but they probably don't want to all be killing babies. So, that really helped answer the question for me about hormonal contraceptives. But it still didn't answer the question about other forms of contraception, barrier methods, these kind of things that don't cause abortions, but our church still teaches that they're wrong. At this time I read Humana Vitae. What I later came to understand is that this mentioning of natural law has more to do with the way God ordains things and the way we can learn about God from observing the way He has created things. And if the natural means the way it has been created by the Creator. So I mean by a contraceptive mentality, because I think this is the key reason why I couldn't understand it and couldn't accept it at the time. So again, I talked a lot about kind of my Christian influence through my early 20s, but in Christian sexual morality, they don't talk a lot about intramarital morality or intramarital sexual ethics. There's a whole lot of emphasis on premarital, what you should and shouldn't do before you get married, a whole lot of emphasis about extramarital, like what you shouldn't do outside of marriage, but there just is not a whole lot of talk about what God wants for you within marriage as far as your sexual relationship with your spouse. I remember a speaker for the Christian Medical Association when I was in first or second year of medical school. He was a professor of ours and a Christian, and he did a series of lunchtime lectures on sex as the topic. And he had some things he spoke about, and then he welcomed questions from the audience. People would write in questions, and he would answer them. And the question came up about contraception and what does the Bible say, or what is the right and wrong? Is contraception immoral or is it moral? And his response was that all Christian faiths allow some type of contraception, and therefore whatever type you and your spouse decide to use is up to you. And I remember feeling, at the time, I was still, hadn't met my husband, hadn't met my roommate, so I still kind of wasn't sure what the church taught or thought about, or what I thought rather, about contraception. But I knew he had missed the boat on that question. I knew he had dodged it. He just did not answer it. But I don't know if he did it on purpose or if it was an honest, his honest response is just that it's all contraception. It's just a matter of what you're going to pick. And that's so not true. So NFP is not Catholic contraception. And if you try to view it that way, the church's teaching will not make sense to you. Our culture teaches that our fertility is at best an unwanted nuisance, something that we have to be aware of all the time and try to subvert it. At worst, it's a disease that is out of control, and we need to control it and manage it, squash it, and sometimes even extinguish it completely. And I really cannot find another example in mainstream medicine where we take a perfectly healthy, functioning body system and cover it up, squash it, or completely eliminate its functioning the way we do with fertility. I just really, not in mainstream medicine anyway, maybe in some fringe groups, but not in mainstream medicine. If you have this mentality, if you're contracepting and a pregnancy occurs, then the method has failed, something went wrong, and the child is then unplanned or unwanted, often unwanted, but definitely unplanned. So contraceptive sex versus sex with natural family planning, contraceptive sex is sterile by nature. The act of intercourse is intrinsically altered so that even the meaning of that union is altered because it has been rendered sterile ahead of time. This mentality and using contraceptive definitely facilitates premarital sexual immorality, extramarital sexual immorality, because it removes those tangible God-given consequences that come along with sexual intercourse. And if anybody is a parent, you're constantly trying to teach your children that actions have consequences. That's what you need them to learn to become a moral individual, is that actions have consequences. And this is an instance where we want the action without the consequence. So to engage in contraceptive intercourse says to the lover, I love you, but I don't trust you with my fertility. This is not something that I can fully share with you. Kimberly Hahn, in a book called Life-Giving Love, she likens it to barrier contraception anyway. She compares it to being invited to a banquet, and you're the guest of honor, and there's this wonderful feast laid before you, and they've worked so hard, and the food is wonderful and delicious, and you enjoy this beautiful meal, and then you excuse yourself to go to the bathroom to vomit because you don't want to live with the physical consequences of enjoying something that was beautiful, and so you expel it from your body. You don't want that to live with you, to live with the consequences of that food consumption. So the alternative to this is the church's teaching, which is openness to life, which is the different mentality to this contraceptive culture. So the church teaches, and this is a quote from Humana Vitae, that responsible parenthood is exercised by those who prudently and generously decide to have another child, and by those who, for serious reason and with due respect to moral precepts, decide not to have another child for either a certain or an indefinite period of time. So you can see one of the things I see from this is that there are reasons to limit the number of children that you have. There are, if you use prudence, that there are legitimate reasons to either for a definite period of time or an indefinite period of time. So I think one of the things that people maybe presume is that the church just wants people to have as many babies as their bodies can bear, and that's not the church's desire for all women. That's not right for all women. Not to say that always it's okay to prevent pregnancy as long as you use an FP, because we're called, as in Humana Vitae, as it states, to prudently and generously decide with prayer and God's divine speaking to you whether or not to have another child, stating that that just by using NFP you're not automatically doing God's will. It's about communicating with God, being open to life, and being open to life in the way that God has ordained for you and your family. Marital love is a sacrament, and it represents the union of Christ and His church, and so marital love was created by God, who is love. And so this is a good thing. It was created by God, given to us by God. It's supposed to be free, total, faithful, and fruitful. And that when it's given between two persons, it's supposed to have a twofold meaning always, procreative and for unification. And that the teaching is that we should not seek to artificially separate those two meanings. And that in procreation, actually, it's the way that we are the most like our Creator. He allows us to be co-creators with Him in bringing forth a new life. And so the difference is that natural family planning actually cooperates with the woman's cycle and with her body when she's naturally fertile and infertile. And so it doesn't thwart anything. It doesn't stop anything that God intended or that God ordained. Therefore, NFP is our attempt to cooperate with God. We work cooperatively with God with the way He created us as sexual beings and with the way He created us as fertile beings and infertile at times beings. And so we are avoiding pregnancy if the reasons are right. And if we are avoiding pregnancy this way, the sex that we're having is not contraceptive. It's non-conceptive. It's unable to conceive because we are infertile by the way God created us. Our bodies at that moment are naturally infertile, and we are engaging in a marital act at a time when God has created us, had created me to be infertile. Therefore, the act is in cooperation with the way God has made me. And we can infer that that is His intention because that's the way He made us. And so this was a process for me, but as I came to understand more the sexual morality teachings of the church, and understand this, cyclic nature of our cycles and our bodies, this teaching in Humana Vitae just made all the sense in the world to me. One thing that has been true for many, many couples I've talked to that use NFP is that idea that the absence makes the heart grow fonder, and that you can have maybe a period in your family life or married life of productivity toward other projects when you can't come together intimately in the act of physical intercourse, and then you kind of have honeymoon periods as well, where there is more daily or more frequent physical intimacy in marriage. So it just creates seasons in marriage, just like there are seasons throughout life. There's lower divorce rates. There's pretty much no side effects. You can also use it to conceive when you're ready to start planning a family. And there's no harm to your body as far as when you do want to conceive or have a baby. This is just a little bit about my practice. I'll brush over it, and then if anybody has specific questions or wants to stay after, I'm happy to answer questions. So naprotechnology is the medical application of the Creighton model natural family planning system. So women Creighton model is taught woman to woman, one-on-one, with a practitioner and a client, and the woman is taught how to monitor her signs of fertility. She meets with the practitioner about every 2 weeks, and it's, like I said, it's only cervical mucus. That's all the woman is monitoring is cervical mucus. There's no temperatures, there's nothing else, it's just cervical mucus. And so in that sense, it's very, very simple, and anyone can use it, anyone can learn it. It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, it doesn't matter how irregular your cycles are, anyone can use the system. And so it's based on this concept that you have, the red is the menstrual flow, and then you have a certain number right here of dry days prior to ovulation where you're infertile. And then this white period here is when you would have signs of fertility. Peak day is near ovulation, and then after that you would have a number of days, again, of infertility. And this is just the basic model that the Creighton model is built on, and any ovulation, any cervical mucus model is built on this as well. And so naprotechnologies takes this information, and so many women will learn the Creighton model system with their practitioner, and they just use it to monitor fertility and infertility, and they never have to do anything other than that. But some women will start using the system, and they'll realize they have very irregular cycles, or they have signs in their chart that the practitioner knows can be a symptom or a sign that there may be something wrong. There may be a hormonal imbalance, there may be fertility problems down the road, and some women will be using the Creighton model to prevent pregnancy and then begin to try to achieve pregnancy and are unsuccessful. And whereas other women would then kind of could only turn to a conventional OBGYN or a conventional fertility clinic, women who know this system can come see a naprotechnology trained physician who knows how to read these charts and how to interpret this information to really come up with what is the underlying hormonal abnormality, or what's the underlying problem, and how can we correct it. And so in doing this, a woman can chart her cycles. If there's a problem, if there's infertility, if there's crazy bleeding, she can come to me. We can draw blood Based on how she's starting, we know exactly where she is in her cycle, and then we have reference ranges from Dr. Hilders, and we know exactly what her hormone levels should be, and we can compare them, and we can determine, she's progesterone deficient on these days of her cycle, or she's an estrogen deficiency. And what we do then is we see the problem specifically, and then we can treat it specifically. And the word that he always uses is cooperatively. We can treat the problem in cooperation with the menstrual cycle. So if there's an estrogen deficiency, we can help replace just that part. Or a progesterone deficiency, we can work on replacing just that part. And so, again, a cooperative progesterone and estrogen replacement, we do use a more bioidentical form of hormones and not the artificial progestins. They're not real progesterone, like what you find in birth control pills. And that's really the standard answer to most problems of irregular cycles or, irregular bleeding or heavy bleeding. The standard answer is just take the pill, take the pill, take the pill. It fixes everything. But like you mentioned before, it just covers it up. It just covers up whatever problem is underlying. It doesn't fix anything. It just makes you bleed lightly and nicely once every 28 days. And then the rest of it gets ignored until, of course, you want to have a baby. Or until, of course, then you wind up with breast cancer or endometrial cancer or some other problem. Possibly because there were other issues that were not being addressed. And so I never prescribe the pill anymore because I know how to do this. This whole approach is that, the missing link is that causes are not sought and found, and they're not treated appropriately. So you can try to go around the system all you want, but there are much higher miscarriage rates with IVF than with naturally occurring pregnancies. There are much higher rates of different types of birth defects with pregnancies conceived through IVF than naturally conceived pregnancies. So there's just information there. There's data there that is not being really highlighted or talked about, and it's really the only option being offered to women when they see their OBGYN and they can't conceive. But there is another option.